Started. Hi there, my name is Renee Hobbs. Today's date is February 13th. It is the spring 2017 semester, and I'm here with the students enrolled in EDC534, Digital Authorship. Looks like we have a pretty good group tonight. I see Hong Yen, I see Mary Wallace, I see Vanessa, I see Marie, Olivia, Donna, Tori, Dan Tucker. I don't see you quite yet. So we're missing Dan Riley and a couple of other folks, but we have a good team. Just a heads up on my life and situation right now. I'm just a tad bit jet lagged because I took the red eye from Los Angeles last night, where I got to talk at Liz Toman's memorial service. Liz Toman was the founder of the Center for Media Literacy in Los Angeles. She's like the grandmother of the media literacy movement. And so, you know, and then I also last week got to go to the UN to speak to about 100 diplomats at the UN on media literacy as a educational strategy for violent extremism. So my head's been swimming with all things related to terrorism, media literacy and terrorism. Who knew? I'm looking forward to a nice calm week this week. And I also have had a chance to read and grade your LEAP 1s. And let me just make a couple comments about that first. After this class, you'll be getting an email with your grade for LEAP 1 and your comments. And I'm also experimenting with a new tool that allows me to annotate your web page, right? Isn't that cool? And so I'm going to point you to how to see the annotations that I made on your web page. Of course, I'm not actually altering your web page. Annotation tools are like a skin. The web page is here, and the annotation tool is like a skin overlay, right? So when you turn on my annotations, just like with the video annotations, you'll see them, right? So when you look at the feedback that I've given you on your LEAP 1, you'll read my comments, and you'll also look at the layer of comments that I've put on top of your web page. So do make sure you take a look at that tonight. Okay, so tonight is one of my, so before we get too far afield, I just kind of want to hear about, you know, the highlights and lowlights of your making a diagram. This was, I think, the first time this was the first time I've actually asked you to make a diagram. As I started to look at them today, I posted them. You see here under diagrams. So I just took them out of the Titan pad. And so they're hyperlinked here. So when you click on the image, here's Lourdes. Here's Lourdes's very elegant synthesis and so forth. Olivia, you experimented with Poplet, and what a great tool for mind mapping Poplet is. As I scroll around, I can see ideas about critical analysis. And I wonder, what were the highlights and lowlights of representing your ideas about the readings in diagram form? What were the highlights and lowlights of representing your ideas in diagram form?
I'll start with a low light. There was a lot of information to synthesize. Mm-hmm. It was hard to pick out exactly, you know, where to put your emphasis, because there were so many possibilities, and narrowing it down was a bit tough. So that was a low light. But a highlight was just realizing how many various ways you can still share this information. Poplet, I did take a look at Olivia's. I like the way she color-coded her various authors. I thought that was a really cool idea. And that was the first I'd used Pictochart for a purpose like this, and thought it was very, very simple to use. So I like Lowlight.
Yeah. And in a way, Mary, by you're describing the Lowlight, you also, when people look at your Pictochart, you chose to focus quite, among many topics, or several topics that you focused on the process product dialectic that all three of those authors are addressing. And I feel like in a lot of ways, the idea of synthesizing is making those strategic choices. So I'm glad you wrestled with it, because no two of you handled this project the same exact way. Yeah. It's so intriguing. So highlights and lowlights of your making a diagram this week. What did that feel like? What'd you like about it? What'd you hate about it?
Kind of along those lines. After I finished mine and I was looking at everyone else's, I'm like, oh, wait, did I do this right? Because I just didn't, I felt like I was doing something different, but everyone was really doing something different.
Did anybody else have some feelings of anxiety?
Absolutely. I've never done a diagram before, so I was lost, and I did try to do the Poplet and I lost everything, couldn't get it back, and I said, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm doing here. So I ended up doing Padlet, which was my first experience, and it took me a while to upload pictures. I didn't know how to do that, but it was scary. I'm happy I did it. I was happy with the end result.
Yeah. So that feeling of anxiety because you don't really have a model, you're not exactly sure what's the way it's supposed to look, right? And there is no way it's supposed to look. But you did have to master not only the ideas of these readings, but then you had to master that new tool, right? So this was actually pretty challenging. Anybody else want to comment on the highlights and lowlights of making a diagram?
I liked how it kind of took all the scrambled ideas I had in my head and put it on this like really organized and clean platform. And it just made me feel like, even though there was anxiety at the beginning, it made me feel calm, like, oh, everything's structured and my thoughts make sense now.
I'm really glad you said that, Tori. I see this project as a little bit of a pre-production activity to your Leap 2. For your Leap 2 project, you have to create a 2-minute moving image media to represent some ideas from the readings. And like Mary said, there's like a lot of ideas in these readings. So your choices and how you organize your choices, that's your creative contribution, right? That's your appropriation or remix. So it was thrilling to see you wrestle with it, and I do hope that you take a look at all the marvelous examples. I'll continue to post those on the website, but they're really quite strong. I'm just going to scroll down so you can see the ones that I have posted already. There's Mary's process and product, a diagram. Vanessa loved these 3 circles. Whoa, girl. Very nice. Empowerment, collaboration, civic engagement. I think you guys are off to the races in terms of figuring out how to synthesize using a combination of image, language, and sound. Okay, so let's see what's on our agenda for tonight. Okay, I've talked about the Leap. Oh, I've talked about the comparison contrast diagrams. Before we talk about the readings more, I thought it would be cool for you guys to watch, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this video. This is produced by my colleague Steve Goodman, who runs a youth media program in New York City called the Educational Video Center. So as we watch it, we're going to try to see if we can make some connections between this video and the work of David Buckingham, Henry Jenkins, and the Adobe Youth Voices, all right? So I'm going to invite you, instead of watching it as a group, I'm going to invite you to mute your microphone, watch it on your own. It's 3 minutes, and then we'll come back to the table for a conversation. Give me a thumbs up if you've got the concept of what we're doing right now. Right? We're watching this 3-minute video, then we're going to come back and talk about it. All right, I'll see you in a bit. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you're back, done watching that little 3 minutes. What is that sound? Whoa. Okay, I don't know exactly what that sound is. Oh. Oh, hold on here. I realize I have my video continuing to play. That's probably the problem. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about what struck you as you watched that 3 minutes. What stood out for you in the stuff that the kids and the teachers shared?
I'll go. So I thought the first thing I thought about right away was the Adobe Youth Voices, because it had to relate with their, involved in their community, and that was all about the Adobe, was that they were picking issues in their community that meant something to them, and then they were able to produce it, and they could use any technology they wanted, and then they were able to share it. And that was a big piece in both videos that we in the Adobe, that they got to share it with their community. Right. So EDC clearly is using the paradigm of community involvement on issues that matter. They share that belief that is a critical part of the learning process. Thanks for starting us off. What else did you notice stuck out when you watched that video? And ideas that related to what you read. Tori.
You could see how like the creative process is very therapeutic to some people. Like we learned about, I think in like week 1 or 2. You could clearly see how these kids kind of had an emotional process because of the creativity that went into it.
Yeah, and they built a lot of creative confidence, which is another idea that is presented in the Adobe Youth Voices. This idea that you develop a set of skills, flexibility, learning how to learn, learning to collaborate. You become more confident in your ability to problem solve through creativity, and that is therapeutic. And that's a good way to think about it. It actually is healing for people who have experienced trauma. Nice. One more reflection on the video that we just watched. Ideas that stood out to you. Stuff kids said, and what was memorable?
I think being able to kind of get out of their element and speak to different people. Like that kid said, he's from Harlem and he was able to get out there, get exposure, speak to other people. And I think that's really important, especially if it's something that they want to do in the future. You have to be able to talk to everybody and be comfortable.
Great point about getting out of your cultural milieu and crossing boundaries to encounter people and ideas from beyond your own immediate situation. Good job. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do next. I want to talk for just a few minutes about how I see the relationship between these three folks, because I have the kind of unique vantage point with David Buckingham and with Steve. With Tony Street from Youth Voices, and with Henry Jenkins. And so I'm going to just talk for a couple of minutes about the important contributions that I think these three scholars make and why they're so fundamental to the practice of digital authors. And I'm also going to share a little bit of the quibbles I have with these three guys, right? And since some of you took the Summer Institute this summer, where you read my white paper on digital and media literacy, you see how I have obviously been my ideas have been inflected by the work of these three great scholars. But all of these scholars were influenced by people who came even before them. And the most important of these is a guy named Len Masterman, who in 1985 wrote a book called Teaching the Media. And this book is really clearly identified in the field as sort of where scholarly writing about media literacy or youth media education really started. And so as I read each of these authors, I see how they're reflecting their reading of Len Masterman and talking back to him in a way. So let's start with David Buckingham. That's the oldest of the readings that you read this week. David Buckingham's work is actually a synthesis. This book that you're reading is actually a synthesis of a lot of research that he's done. Over the years, his research really engaged talking with children in schools about media and popular culture. It wasn't that he did curriculum or lesson plans. He came into classrooms and he talked to kids about media. And he discovered that kids know a lot about media. They think in sophisticated ways about media, and they struggle with it. So in the chapters that you read this past week, there's in the Getting Critical chapter, there's a little part that's a very interesting and problematic to me. And it's this idea that he's worried that sometimes when critical analysis of media is taught, the teacher has a right answer. And there's kind of like an ideology that you're supposed to learn. And David Buckingham goes out of his way in this book to problematize that. Now, that's a really interesting idea, because at the college level, a lot of what passes for media literacy might look like that. It might look like a form of persuasion, right? It might take the form of kind of telling you what to think, not how to think. And so I think it's interesting. There's a line in the chapter that he says that I think I call out in the questions for you guys to discuss in a little bit. He says something like, he thinks it's essential, Buckingham thinks it's essential to teach media analysis in ways that do not depend upon the imposition of teacherly authority. Now, that is a topic for discussion, because there are a lot of pros to teacherly authority, right? I mean, there are things teachers know how to do that kids don't know how to do. And so, but he sees, and he presents in this chapter, the disadvantages to too much teacherly authority happening in the media literacy class. Another thing that I really think is important that David Buckingham, a contribution that he makes in this book, is his worrying about the difference between teaching about media and teaching with media. He makes a big deal about this distinction. And I want you to wrestle with whether or not that even matters anymore. He's channeling his reading of Len Masterman, who was really worried that teachers were confused about media literacy, and they thought that, you know, oh, if I use a YouTube video, that means I'm doing media literacy, right? So I wonder, does the distinction between teaching with media and teaching about media matter so much anymore? Why or why not? So I feel like Buckingham's got a lot of interesting ideas. Those two have a lot of implications for how we're talking about digital literacy in relation to digital authorship. Okay, so let me just talk for a few minutes about Henry Jenkins. So in 2006, when Henry Jenkins wrote this piece for the MacArthur Foundation, well, those of us in the media literacy community, we were happy and angry at the same time, right? We were happy because Jenkins really clearly identifies three elements of the legacy of media literacy that are important to him. He talks about the transparency problem, the idea that most people don't know how media is constructed, and so they can't actually interrogate it because they get confused about the representation and the reality. They can't tell the difference between fake news and real news, right? And he also writes about the ethics challenge, this idea that social media in a participatory culture creates opportunities for you to be, well, responsible or irresponsible. And there's a lot of gray areas. And because this medium is so new, we don't know what advice to give kids about how to learn to be responsible in this new arena. Every time we think we have got it, got a sense of it, the medium changes, right? Snapchat in 2017 is not what Snapchat was in 2014, right? And so the ethical dimensions of interacting with social media, Jenkins was really keen on. But he proposes these new media literacy competencies like play and appropriation and transmedia navigation and judgment and collective intelligence. And these actually are really intriguing competencies that often in the context of formal education are, well, suspect. So the one that usually intrigues us the most as educators is his idea about play. right? Because what the literature on video games and playing to learn suggests is that play really builds intellectual curiosity. Play builds creative confidence. It has it's motivating. So as I read Buckingham now, 10 years after he wrote the article, I wonder, have these new media literacy competencies that Buckingham writes about, have they become part of the formal K-12 education context? Why or why not? So the third author that we read he's not really identified very easily as an author because his work is proprietary. And that's the term we use when you get paid for writing. In academic worlds, we sometimes get paid for writing, but mostly we don't, right? Or not very much. But Tony Street founded a youth media organization in Chicago called Street Media, and he is a youth media practitioner from way back. He worked with Adobe Youth Voices, and one thing I hope you noticed was, is that not the coolest PDF in the whole world? I hope some of you got a chance to click on the videos that are embedded. Give me a thumbs up if you got to click on the videos that are embedded in that PDF. Ah, that's so beautiful. And how about the interactive part where you can essentially diagnose and develop a youth media program by answering the questions and filling in wow. So it kind of makes sense that the guys who invented the PDF, right, would use the PDF in a really original way, right? And I wish we saw more products that made great use of PDF the way that one does. For me, there's so many exciting things about the Adobe Youth Media project that I wrote a whole book on this topic, and it's coming out this year. It's called Create to Learn. But I am really entranced by this concept of creative confidence. And I also am really intrigued at the way Adobe Youth Voices talks about reflection and feedback, right? So as I read that work, I think good teachers know how to engage learners and step aside and let learners take ownership of projects, right? Project-based teaching has been around for, depending on how you measure it, maybe 100 years now, right? But we teachers still we benefit from having ideas about how to structure the reflection and feedback process, especially when it comes to students' creative work. How do you provide feedback to students about their creative work that helps them to grow? And that's different from assessment. And I think the Adobe Youth Voices folks have thought really deeply about how feedback supports the creative learning process. So those are my short little notes on Buckingham, Jenkins, and Tony Street of Adobe Youth Voices. As you were reading these pieces this week, did you have any unanswered questions or issues with these authors that we should discuss? Okay, so how about we take a look at those great questions? Because truthfully, any one of these questions can make for a great discussion. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to break you up into a small team, and your team is going to choose just one or two of these questions. Let's read them aloud, and you can decide which ones are most interesting to you. What is textual analysis? They kind of go in order. Buckingham, and then Jenkins, and then Adobe Youth Voices. So from Buckingham, what is textual analysis? Or sometimes he calls it deconstruction. And what is contextual analysis? Now, why does Buckingham say that as an instructional strategy, media production is not an end in itself? There's a typo there. Is not an end in itself. He says it's a means to another end. Why is that a big deal for him? Why is that an important idea? And why does Buckingham think it's important to distinguish between teaching about media and teaching with media? Why is that an important distinction in his mind? And why is Buckingham concerned with vocational approaches to teaching media production in career-oriented contexts? He's a Debbie Downer on that in a big way in this reading, isn't he? Why is he so not happy about that way of teaching media? And why does Buckingham believe it's essential to teach media analysis in ways that do not depend upon the imposition of teacherly authority? That's the question I was so intrigued by in my reading of his chapter. So in the Jenkins piece, what is the definition of participatory culture? How does it challenge some of the norms of doing school? What are play and performance? Why are those considered new media competencies? And what about appropriation? What is appropriation? Why is it considered important as a new media practice? Now, what are the markers? This is from the Adobe Youth Voices piece. What are the markers of a person who has creative confidence? And why does EVC and Adobe Youth Voices place so much emphasis on the development of youth media projects that are rooted in the lives and community of learners? Why are those projects positioned so rigorously in the context of addressing community projects? So as you work with your team, feel free to open up your media education book. Feel free to refer back to the Jenkins white paper, Confronting the Challenges of Participatory Culture, Media Education for the 21st Century. And of course, feel free to go poke around inside the marvelous PDF. So I'm now going to let you choose which of those questions you want to discuss. I'm going to let you talk in your small group for about 7 minutes, and then we'll come back and I'll ask you to share one or two of the most interesting ideas that came up in the discussion for you. Give me a thumbs up if you're clear on what we're supposed to be doing now. We do this every week, so it should be really familiar. Here's the breakout rooms. 3 rooms, 3 or 4 people per room. Let's take it away. You have 7 minutes. Okay, it looks like you are mostly back. Looks like you are mostly back. We are missing maybe just a couple more. One of the breakout rooms is not quite back. Okay, so I'd love to hear from a representative from each of the 3 breakout rooms. Which questions did you tackle, and what were some key insights that emerged from your brief conversation? Who wants to go first? Thank you, Dan.
So we started to talk about participatory culture with the concerns that Jenkins had brought up, and why we thought that that was really quite an empowering plan. That we saw things, and I had mentioned one thing in the video that there were a number of ways in which, you know, they talked about the persona, and I think it was more Buckingham who did that, but certainly there's a whole set of skills and a whole set of maturity possibilities that are allowed when a student is allowed to take, within a group, that much responsibility. So we kind of highlighted what we could from Jenkins, and then on the side kind of beat up Buckingham a little bit for, you know, not being completely with it.
Nice. And what a great observation about the way in which when students have the responsibility that a whole bunch of competencies get challenged, activated, right? And have the opportunity to develop. Thanks for sharing. Let me hear from the representative of another breakout room. What were some key insights that emerged from your discussion? Tori.
So we also talked about the same question, so it's a good follow-up answer to give you. So what we talked about was how participatory culture, we think it was wise that Jenkins focused on that rather than technology itself and isolated, because interactive technology without people using it isn't interactive, it's just technology. It's the people that make it interactive. So we talked about Twitter, for instance. If people didn't catch on to Twitter and we didn't use Twitter, it wouldn't be social media, it would just be media. So there's a lot of value in studying cultures that participate in technology rather than just the technology itself.
Nice way of helping us understand the reframing that is at the heart of that concept of participatory culture. Good job. And let me hear from the third breakout room. What was the key questions that you explored and what insights emerged from your discussion?
I can answer that one.
Thank you.
We talked about teaching about media versus teaching with media. And then we said that, teaching about media is where you get into the critical analysis. And teaching with media is where you web quest or you integrate media with your existing lesson. And then we kind of went from there into the teacherly authority. Mm-hmm. And when you're teaching that critical evaluation, and then we use the illustration from my daughter's 7th grade English teacher saying that when they do interpretation of their poetry or whatever piece, that she allows for creativity and personal interpretation. And so she tells them that there is no wrong answer when it's an interpretation. And so I think that not using teacherly authority at that point gives the creativity and personal interpretation without them being the fear of being, I got the wrong answer.
Yeah, it's absolutely essential to have that kind of freedom in coming to your own understanding. And if there is a sense that there is a right answer, Buckingham said, then the kids are just going to parrot back to you what they think you want to hear. Of course, they learn how to do that really well. By the time they're in high school, they're good at that, right? They guess, they suss you out, and they think, oh, you'll give me an A if I say blah, 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 right? And Buckingham says, well, we're not going to get a lot of new ideas if that's really all kids are doing, right? So, okay, so it seems like you've done a really good job engaging the readings, and I bet that means that you are now really starting, you should be really starting to think about which of all of these cool ideas that we've been drinking in from these authors, which one do you want to try to represent by making an audio-visual 2-minute video? So let me share my screen with you. I want to see what questions you have about Leap 2, because Leap 2 is coming up due, this is a slight adjustment from the syllabus originally now. Leap 2 is due February 27th, okay? And Leap 2 says, make a video no more than 2 minutes in length that explains a subset of ideas from the course readings in a video of no more than 2 minutes in length. I wanted to, of course, you're free to use any tool you want, and you see there's a link there that takes you to a bunch of different screencasting, animation, or video programs. But if I were you, I would also consider using the easiest tool possible, right? Which is the amazing Shadow Puppet, or Puppetedu. right? So I'm going to make a video with Puppetedu. Watch how easy. It's designed for a 5-year-old. I press the green button, right? I select some images or videos from what I have on my screen. I get to add text onto the screen so I can have a title. I can add music, right? And then when I press the start button, it gives me a 3, 2, 1. And it says, okay, you're rolling. I'm making a video now. And I wanted to tell you about my experience of going to the Liz Toman Memorial Service, where I got to talk about my relationship, my 30-year relationship with Elizabeth Toman, the founder of the Center for Media Literacy, and hear about all of the funny stories and wonderful memories of the people who were here. Of course, this isn't a big idea about the readings, but watch that. I just made a video. Okay, and one click, upload it to YouTube. Okay, so you have a lot of freedom in choosing which tool to use. Don't be overwhelmed. Pick a tool that you want to learn, right? Or that you already know. But if you want to use an easy one, that's cool too. So let's see what questions you have about the Leap 2 project, which is due not next week, but the week after next. Who's got a question?
Is that app you just used on the list that you linked?
It sure is. Okay. So here's the simple video tools to use. And if you go down here to the list, they're organized: social media, podcasting, audio, images, animation. Is it really on the list? Let me think. Oh yeah, there it is. Shadow Puppet. Make a simple movie using a free app on your smartphone. And there's actually there's quite a few others too there. Thanks for asking. Who's got another question? Who's got another question? Leap 2. No, you guys are feeling really good about that, right? I do want to call your attention to the criteria for evaluation, right? Because this is how I will allocate the points for this project, right? So make sure that you've selected a key set of ideas from the course readings and explain these ideas in a way that shows your understanding. Make sure your video has a thesis statement and uses visual and verbal modes of expression. And make a connection to how these ideas are relevant to your life, your work, or your professional interests. And make sure that this video attracts and holds viewer interest, is well organized, and uses image, language, and sound effectively to inform the target audience. So this is a pretty fun opportunity for you. Now, let me also talk a little bit about what's due the week after the 27th. So that Leap 2 is due not next week, but the week after. And coming up is your first reflective multimedia essay. That's due March 3rd. So in a piece of writing that goes on your blog, you're reflecting on what you're learning by describing, analyzing, and synthesizing. In this essay, you identify and explore connections between key ideas and information that you're learning in this class. And then you reflect on your own identity as a learner. What are you noticing about yourself as a learner? How are you applying ideas from the reading to your own life? What questions is this course raising for you? What topics are you hoping to explore in your independent work for your final research and creative projects? So since you're sharing this reflective essay as a blog post, you should use language, image, sound, and multimedia as part of your creative expression. In general, I'm expecting this blog post to be about 1,200 to 1,500 words. That's about a 4 to 5 page double-spaced Word document. This part of the course experience is hugely important, the reflective essays, in helping formulate your own understanding of the ideas that we're encountering in this class, and especially about your creative identity, as a learner. What questions do you have about the multimedia essay that is due, the first one that is due on March 3rd? Questions? No, because you're feeling pretty good about that, right? That's going to be fun to write. It's going to be fun to write. It's actually going to help you with Leap 2, even though it's due a little bit later. It might be something that you use as part of your learning process. Okay, so then let me just, since we're stumbling to the finish line here, let me talk a little bit about what I'd like you to do for next week. Next week, we are continuing to read deeply in this area of digital authorship. Here's the activities I'd like you to do. First, watch this short video about the City Voices City Visions. It's a project in the Buffalo Public Schools. Consider why this video is quite different than the examples we saw from EVC and Adobe Youth Voices. Make at least one comment on the video using the ANT annotation tool. Remind me, I think you guys have used the ANT annotation tool, right? Give me a thumbs up if you've used this ANT annotation tool, right? So you guys all have an account already. Make at least one comment. We're really trying to think about, we're comparing and contrasting. This Buffalo project is awesome, but it's different than the City Voices project, and it's different than the Youth Voices project. Why? How? What do you notice? Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing, let me go back to it. Second thing, now you have some choice this week, just a little bit of choice in what to read. There are 3 choices. I'd like you to choose 2 of these. And after you choose and read these 2 pieces, use the Moot discussion board in response to week 5 readings and offer an insight gained by reading these works. The focus questions we're working on next week are, how does collaboration support and extend the creative process? Why do creative people work together? How do they work together? And what can go wrong? So, we're reading a kind of classic article by Vivian Chavez and Lissa Soep called Youth Radio and the Pedagogy of Collegiality. That's a link on, that's a PDF file. We're digging into Kids on YouTube by Patricia Lang and reading one chapter called Video Mediated Lifestyles. And then we're also reading a speech that Andrew Byrne gave at the London Institute of Education in 2013. So after you choose any 2 of these pieces, put your comments on the Moot discussion board. Now, I would like you also to watch this short video from England that features 8th grade kids, middle school kids, planning a short drama sequence. And so I'll ask you to watch this short, I think it's a 14-minute video, and make one comment about what you notice about the pedagogy. This video was designed to teach the pedagogy, and I wonder what you notice about how it does that. Finally, we are continuing to tweet our experience with the rhetoric and the reality of creative confidence and collaboration as you have experienced it in any aspect of your life. Maybe tonight you'll tweet about your diagram and the struggle and delight of completing it. Or maybe you'll tweet about the pre-production process that you're going through as you think through your Leap 2 project. But share some reflection publicly with our team and the world on this, the rhetoric and the reality of creative confidence and collaboration as you are experiencing it. Okay, so let's take your temperature on this. 5 fingers up means, wow, I'm up for this crazy week ahead. 1 is like, oh, holy shit. this is overwhelming. Oh, no way in hell I'm going to manage it. And, 3 is, that's right. Where are you at now? Take your temperature at the end of the night, at the end of the day. Okay, challenge and maybe a little beyond challenge. All right, I think I'm happy with those numbers. Those sound really good. Okay, so are there any last questions before I let you go? All right, you've wasted another hour in this amazing, weird, interactive way of learning we're calling EDC534. We did jazz hands last week, didn't we? No? Okay, so hands up. Hands up. Okay, so we're going to say goodbye by going jazz hands. Jazz hands. All right, jazz hands, you guys. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.